Episode 97 of the Pilot podcast takes off now.
My name is Kelvin Mason. I'm the manager of pilot outreach and leadership development at Delta Airlines, and I have responsibility for the Propel program.
What is going on, AV Nation, and welcome back to episode number 97 of the Pilot podcast. Now, a few of you may have noticed there's two episode 96s. That's because I made a mistake. I also released another episode that was 96, but it wasn't an interview, so I didn't know what to title it, but I guess now there's two 96s and a 97. Either way, it's going to stay two 96s and a 97 until after episode 100. That way my dad's episode can still be episode number 100. That is right. I interviewed my dad, episode number 100, coming out in a couple weeks. Make sure to look out for that. But anyways, enough of that. Enough of the housekeeping. I want to let you guys know about today's episode. I kind of just was thinking, what are the airlines actually doing to help the pilot shortage, to kind of solve the pilot shortage? Well, I did nothing else than to reach out to Delta themselves and got in contact with Kelvin, and we talked about Delta's Propel program. And Propel is an amazing program. It's an amazing tool that Delta has in place to attract more pilots, to get more pilots flying for Delta Airlines. And as you're going to listen to this and hear, it has some pretty great benefits, and you can get to Delta pretty quick. So definitely check it out. It's a hard program to get into, and they have it that way for a reason, but check it out. It is definitely worth it. AV Nation, if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. We're currently at 470 and 30 more to the big 500. By then I might be giving away a t-shirt. That's right, a t-shirt. I have a pre-order out right now. Go to shoppilot2pilot.com and you can pre-order a Pilot to Pilot t-shirt. Right now, the price is $20 for the pre-order. I don't know how long I'm leaving for 20. The normal price of the t-shirt's gonna be $25. So go ahead and scoop that t-shirt up right now as you can for $20. And I might be doing a giveaway once we hit 500 reviews. So go ahead and leave a review if you haven't done so already. Also want to give a special shout out to our Patreon of the week. Shout out to Jimmy Reeks for being the Patreon of the week. If you would like to be the Patreon of the week, go to patreon.com/pilot2pilot. AV Nation, I don't want to have to keep you any longer. So without any further ado, here's Kelvin from Delta's Propel program. Kelvin, what's going on? Welcome to the Pilot podcast.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to talk more about Delta's Propel program and kind of just see what they're doing to help get more pilots involved, get more pilots to Delta, and help this whole pilot shortage things we got going on here soon.
Great.
Yeah, so why don't we just start off right in the beginning? What is Delta's? What is Propel? What is kind of the whole reason for the Propel program?
Right. Well, back in the 2016, 2017 timeframe, Delta put a team together to research options for hiring pilots here in the next several years. And a team went out and visited over 25 schools that have college aviation programs and did focus groups with hundreds of students and prospective pilots, and really just asked them what it is that they are looking for in their careers. And what they heard was a desire to have engagement from the major airlines. You know, they were used to seeing the regional carriers come out to the college campuses, but not really the major airlines. And they also wanted options in their careers. So they wanted to be able to have different pathways to eventually get themselves to a major airline. So with that information in mind, the team created a pathway program specific to college aviation students, and also a pathway program for current Delta employees. So for example, we have mechanics and flight attendants and gate agents and corporate employees in our office environment that have an interest in aviation, may have done some flight training on the side, and this gives them a pathway option to potentially pursue a career as a commercial airline pilot.
Yeah, that's really cool that you mentioned how they college students aren't really used to seeing major airlines come in and talk to them. You know, it's
right.
I was once a college student not too long ago. I went to Ohio State. I was in their aviation department, and you constantly see the regional airlines there. You constantly see all that, and that's kind of like what is next in your career. Obviously, you go get your flight time, you can be a CFI, you get your everything you need, you go to the regional, and then hope and pray that maybe a major comes and finds you. So it's really cool that Delta actually went out and talked to the people that they're going to hire eventually. Be like, look, how can we kind of like ease your mind? How can we make this seem like it's more attainable? How can we help you get to where you want to be? So I think it's really cool that you even went out and did that.
Yeah, and frankly, the landscape has just changed so much in a very short period of time because the Propel program itself was launched in 2018, and since then we've seen other major carriers who come out with pathway programs that are very similar. So definitely a changing in how the airlines are looking at sourcing pilots.
Absolutely. And I mean, all the surveys and everything's even saying it's just going to keep getting worse from here on out. So everyone has to do their part, whether it's the airlines, whether it's maybe even the FAA or the gov, whatever it is. We just got to keep finding ways to get more pilots out here.
Right. And on that particular note, we actually had, as we approached the creation of this program, we thought about, we need to hire pilots. That's our main goal here. We want to bring pilots to Delta, but we also want to do this in a way that helps sort of all the different entities involved with producing and developing pilots. So, for example, you have commercial flight training schools, college aviation programs, the military. So what are things that we can do to not only address our own hiring needs, but also help out those entities as well?
And what are you guys doing to help out the other entities?
All right. One specific example is with our college pathway program. So the typical scenario is you have a college student who will hit their 1,000 hours and then will immediately move on to their next step at a regional airline. And in the process, unfortunately, we'll leave a few students behind trying to find a new instructor. So one requirement under Propel is that those students agree to stay until the end of the academic semester after they hit their 1,000 hours. So that's one thing that helps the college aviation programs with their staffing predictability for CFIs.
No, I mean, it's really interesting bringing that up because I've talked to many people that I've interviewed, and a lot of people have had a huge stumble in their career because their flight instructor, like right when they're getting ready to solo, right when they're getting ready to take that check ride, their flight instructor's like, all right, peace, I'm out. Regional airline, here I come. Adios. And it's like, oh, cool, I'm happy for you, but what about me? What about the other students,
Right.
And I mean, you really can't blame them for taking that opportunity because it's kind of the culture that we created. It's you go get your time, you leave as soon as possible, and you just let other people deal with the mess behind you. And I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not a bad thing to do that. And there's a couple of people that I've talked to who made sure they finished up with their students, and that's really a cool thing that they did, but no one had to do that. So the fact that that's going to be part of this is actually going to be a big thing for many future students. And I think it's something that will really be appreciated by those students as well.
Right. We're just hoping to provide more predictability in staffing for the schools to have that be one less challenge for them.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about the college pass. So say like I'm a new college student, say I'm going to Ohio State, I'm starting right now as a freshman and I want to apply for Propel. What do I have to do to apply for Propel, and kind of what does my path look like from there?
Sure. So the groups that are eligible are juniors, seniors, and recently graduated CFIs from our partner universities. So right now, Delta has 11 partner universities across the United States, and that number is going to continue to grow. But right now, we have 11. Those students have to be enrolled in a major that is eligible for restricted ATP. So, for example, if you're someone who's enrolled in an aviation management degree and you're doing your flight training Part 61 on the side, unfortunately, you would not be eligible to apply for Propel. So, this is strictly for those enrolled in the actual flight majors.
Is there a reason to kind of exclude Part 61, or is it just kind of how it's all kind of planned out and worked out?
Well, our model is really intended to have someone hit their 1,000 hours under the restricted ATP and then flight instruct at that university. And so someone who's doing their training on the outside and building up towards 1,500 hours, it just doesn't necessarily fit with our model.
No, that's absolutely correct. And I mean, yeah, I kind of didn't even think about that because I did Part 141, I did my private, and then I went to Charlotte and I did everything else Part 61 just because it was a little bit quicker for me to get it done. But yeah, obviously
Sure.
restricted ATP, 1,000 hours, get them in, kind of make that process go.
Right.
So what's next? What's with the, so say that's me now. I just finished, I have 1,000 hours. I'm a CFI. I finished my last month that I need to be there. What's next for that? Do I go to a
Sure.
regional from there? Do you guys have kind of partnerships with certain regionals?
For students who are selected into the Propel program, they have several options on which direction they can go. So initially, they will flight instruct, as I mentioned, until they hit their 1,000 hours. Once they hit that point, they have 3 different pathway options, essentially. The most common that we see people gravitating towards is the regional route. So they would go to one of our 3 Delta Connection carriers, who are Endeavor, SkyWest, and Republic. We also have an option where they can fly through the U.S. military. So if they choose to go to the Air Force Reserve or the Air National Guard, then they can actually use that as their mechanism to build time and experience and eventually get to Delta. And the third option, and this one is somewhat in flux right now, is through Delta Private Jets, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Delta that does corporate flying. There was a recent announcement there where they are now partnering up with Wheels Up, which is another corporate flying outfit, and Delta will have an equity stake in that. So currently we're reviewing how that might work. But those, as of today, are the three main options for college students in the program.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up because I mean, I'm in the corporate world, in the fractional world right now, and obviously Delta Private Jets and Wheels Up are kind of now a thing. So is that currently right now just for the Delta Private Jet side and then possibly maybe going into the Wheels Up side? Or is it just going to be when you, I guess the program's so young, there might not even be pilots in that area. So maybe it's not going to affect you guys too much though, right?
That's exactly right. We had just some initial discussions with Wheels Up, but we're not too far down the path as of yet.
Yeah. All right. Good. I guess it happened at a good time then, right? Before you had like
Right.
multiple people over there. Yeah. So what? Yeah. So a pilot is coming through this. They're going to the regional. Are they kind of automatically going to have a job with Delta, or do they have to apply and wait for them to get called, or is it kind of like a pseudo flow program? How's it going to work?
Sure. So when they apply for the program and they are selected in, they actually get a qualified job offer at that point to Delta. And that just will require them to go through several additional steps before they eventually make it to a Delta flight tech. And we've talked about some of those. So they'll flight instruct at their school until they hit their 1,000 hours. They'll go to one of those three routes that I just mentioned. They will be paired up with a Delta mentor who is a current Delta pilot who volunteers their time in our program. And there'll be that engagement model that'll exist along their entire time in Propel. Once they've been in the program, once they've been at either a regional, the U.S. military, or Delta Private Jets for 42 months or less, then we will actually bring them up to Delta. There will be no additional interview process they'll have to go through. They already had that job offer from when they were first selected.
Dang, so it's kind of like once you hit 42 months, you're in and you're a pilot at Delta.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we'll do one final review just to make sure that you've complied with our requirements all along. There's a document they sign at the time that we bring them into the program called the Propel Pledge, where we're wanting to make sure that they abide by Delta's rules of the roads, which is sort of a kind of corporate guidelines that we have at Delta, and align with our core values. And assuming they do that and they're successful as a flight instructor and at the either the regionals, the military, or DPJ, then they'll be on their way to Delta.
It's crazy. That's really cool. I mean, just someone hearing that right now, because obviously people think about major airline is the goal. It's where you want to go. It's what we've all been told growing up is how you make it in this career is usually being a major airline pilot. Now, it's not saying you can't have a great career at other places and you shouldn't, if you like corporate flying, then stay corporate flying. But having that opportunity to hear in 42 months with me being at Wheels Up or me being at where the other places you mentioned, the Air Force Reserves or flight instructing and doing all that kind of stuff, you have the opportunity to be a Delta pilot. Like it's a guarantee. Like that's pretty unbelievable. Obviously, like you said, you got to hold your own. You got to stick to some things. You got to do good in what you're doing. You can't just be like a bad person. You have to have somewhat of a good reputation, But it's still got to be a really good thing to see kind of that, you see that goal and you can see it being more attainable than maybe just throwing in your application and really hoping, or just throwing in for that flow and really hoping that flow sticks too when you get hired at that regional.
Right. And that's kind of been the model all along. Pilots have always had to sort of find their own way to eventually get to a major airline. And in many cases, that's a process that could take, more than 10 years. And then what's exciting about Propel is that you actually have this defined pathway and, as you mentioned, an accelerated timeline to actually get there.
How long did it take you guys to come up with this whole plan? I know it kind of mentioned you said 2016 to 2018. Was it all done in those 2 years, or is it kind of more of what was, I guess my point is, what was the hardest part of putting this all together? Because it seems like a lot to put together and kind of to promote to everyone and tell Delta to sign off on it and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I think a big part of it was just that nothing like this existed before. So it was truly just creating something from scratch. And as I mentioned, that initial core team went out and did a tremendous amount of research, trying to come up with a solution that worked for everyone, not just something that was designed to address Delta's hiring needs. So a tremendous amount of work went into it, and it's still something that's evolving. This pathway program for majors is still a fairly new thing. And as I mentioned, other carriers are kind of creating their own versions of it as well. So I think this is the way of the future.
I 100% agree. I think that this is something that's needed. I mean, I think it's going to be a great option for a lot of students, and I'm really excited that you were coming on to talk about this, and I have a couple more questions and stuff about it for. But I just want to say thank you for doing this because I know if I was a college student, I would have been all over. I've been like, all right, cool, let's go, let's do it. This is what we need to do. I'm going to Delta now.
Right.
My dad flies for American. He'd probably be like shaking his fist at me, like, how could you go to Delta? How dare you? But yeah, it's a great thing, and I'm glad other airlines are doing it, and maybe FedEx, UPS, and others are doing it too because it's definitely something that's needed.
Right. Yeah, we see a tremendous amount of interest for it right now.
Yeah, and I think part of this whole pilot shortage, I think kind of the airline industry needs to come together as a whole to try to fix it, not make it about Delta, United, American, kind of like how do we get more pilots because that's what we need more than anything right now.
Right. And we see that. I mean, the term pilot shortage has been tossed around for years, and that is definitely something that is, a reality, especially in the regional world. We see that to a high degree, but, at some point here in the very near future, it's going to be impacting the majors as well. And that's a large part of why these pathway programs have been created and are going to be utilized significantly over the next few years.
You might not have on hand, or do you have kind of an estimate? I remember reading about how Delta needs to hire a certain amount of pilots this year and maybe in the future. Do you kind of have those hiring plans with you or kind of on top of your head?
Sure. In 2020, Delta will be hiring north of 1,300 pilots, which is a huge number for 1 year. And over the next decade, it's going to be a ballpark number of about 8,000 pilots.
So let's talk about 2020 hiring. Obviously, Propel won't be included in that because it's just so new and it's not possible. But
Right.
what do they look for in those 1,300 pilots? Are they going to, I guess my first thing is, does Delta have a flow with regionals? Do they take from a flow?
Not right now. In the past, Delta has had flow arrangements with certain regionals. Right now, though, our primary hiring model for pilots beyond Propel, which again is more of a long-term investment, is our normal pilot selection process, or what we call our off-the-street hiring model. So we hire pilots from several sources, of course, of military backgrounds, regional airline backgrounds, corporate flying, cargo operators. So a number of different factors. So in addition to meeting just sort of the minimum requirements and having that flying experience, of course, we're looking for people that have leadership experience. We're looking for people who will be leaders from day one.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously being a pilot and leader is kind of go hand in hand, right?
Right.
You don't want to have a follower sitting next to you in the cockpit. So yeah, I would
Right.
definitely agree. No, that's great. I didn't realize Delta used to have a flow and didn't have a flow because now it seems like flows are the big thing. Everyone's jumping on flows right now. But let's also talk about, so like I said, there's 1,300 pilots that you guys need to hire. Is there kind of I don't know if you know the answer to this, I'm just going to ask it, but is there a quota of like military people you have to hire and off the street versus regional pilots, or is it just kind of best man up or best woman up and we hire whoever's up?
No, so we have thousands of applicants for Delta pilot positions. We have a team of individuals that goes in and reviews all those applications, and we're bringing in the most competitive candidates. So it doesn't matter if your background is with the military or regional or anything like that. We're just trying to find the best pilots for Delta.
Yeah, which that as you should.
Right.
What has the feedback been so far with the people in Propel? Have they been pretty happy with the program?
Yeah, they've been very excited about it. So as I mentioned, we have two different populations of individuals. It's the students out of the college aviation programs, and then in smaller numbers, we have Delta employees who have gone through the process. Again, these are individuals who have done some limited flight training, who have been selected into Propel, and are off getting their ratings and building their time. And I think they've all realized what a tremendous opportunity it is, and they're very excited and can't wait to eventually get here. Our first Propel pilot will probably reach Delta sometime in 2022, and that'll be a big reason to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's gonna be pretty cool. I actually met up with. I was down in Atlanta for an overnight, and I met up with one of my buddies who was friends with a flight attendant who was getting ready to apply to the Propel program. So I thought that was really cool to talk with her. She's just getting ready to finish her private pilot license, and she's currently a flight attendant for Delta. And she was talking about how excited she is and how this is like the perfect program for her to reach her goal and her dreams.
Right. That's something for Delta employees who are, in a different career field. It's even that much more difficult to try to navigate your way into the flight deck at Delta. And so this is something that was very warmly received. We have a tremendous amount of interest in this. We'll be actually launching our application window for our employees next month, and there's quite a few who are hoping to be successful this go around.
Good. That's good to hear. I guess one thing too is I feel like a lot of times airlines kind of come out with stuff like this and there might be like some like fine print. Is there any fine print to this? Is there anything that could like hold this all back and keep them from reaching Delta and having them being stuck in their other job or whatever? Because I know we said 42 months, it's like kind of like a set thing, but like obviously things happen, economies crash, things happen. And is there anything kind of fine print like that in this at all?
No, I mean, it's, we have a significant need to hire a lot of pilots in a very short period of time. So assuming someone is successful with the requirements of the program, then they will be here sooner rather than later.
What's your goal for Propel? Like say you and I are talking again in 20 years and we're talking about how Propel has just changed Delta's hiring, how it's done everything, and most of your applicants are coming from the Propel program. What's kind of your like end goal with this, or kind of like your biggest dreams with Propel?
Sure. At the end of the day, I think it's never going to be our main source of hiring pilots. It's just going to be a way to supplement our hiring, and it gives us access to, in the way the program is currently structured, to high quality college aviation students who have what it takes to become a commercial airline pilot, and then again investing in our own employees who have this dream of transitioning their careers. But I do think we will always continue to hire directly off the street. As I mentioned before, we're going to continue to pull directly from other airlines, from the military. There's a number of great sources for pilots, and we're going to utilize them all.
You ever think you'd venture out and maybe include some freight operations there? Because I know a lot of good pilots, and I mean, I did this myself, so that's why I'm asking it. But I got a lot of great experience flying single pilot freight, or even there's some places you can go fly with a crew and freight. Is there any thought process of maybe adding that to the list too?
Yeah, we're looking at essentially evaluating lots of other options in terms of pathways. College aviation is just one particular source of pilots, but we are looking at different ways. Whether it's going to be commercial flight schools or whether it's cargo operators. There's a number of different ways that we can go there, and all that's on the table.
Good. That's awesome. It's good to see. It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes in the next 5 years, because like we talked about, the industry is changing, and it's changing very, very fast. Like you said, Delta needs to hire 1,300 pilots this year and 8,000 in the next 10 years. Is that what you said?
That's exactly right.
And how many pilots do you guys have on campus right now?
We have about 14,500 currently, but we have a huge retirement wave coming over the next few years. And as I'm sure you're aware, there was essentially no pilot hiring or very little pilot hiring in basically the decade following 9/11. And that's the reason that the industry as a whole is really in a place of needing to hire a high number of pilots in a fairly short period of time.
Absolutely. 8,000 out of 14,000 pilots. Like even just think about the seniority numbers that you're going to be able to jump within 10 years. It's just unbelievable. If you get hired now, you're going to be living pretty good and flying some pretty cool equipment in the next 10 years, right?
Tremendous amount of upward mobility. That is for sure.
And my dad's got to be so frustrated with where I am in the industry, just because he's been sitting, he never got furloughed or anything. So he was always lucky with that, but he's never had the seniority he's wanted. And he's always just kind of been battling that seniority card. And then now pilots right now kind of don't understand how good they actually have it, and how much mobility they have, and how they kind of have choices. It's like no one had a choice before. You always got hired, and whoever hired you first, you always went. But like eventually you might have the choice of where you want to go, which is kind of mind-boggling in the aviation industry.
Right. It is definitely a buyer's market. It is a great time to be a pilot.
It is. It's crazy, which is awesome. Good for pilots. It's about time. Kelvin, thanks for coming on and talking a little bit more about Propel. I mean, this is just such a great opportunity for people coming up, whether they're at Delta now and they want to, maybe they're a flight attendant like we talked about, and they're like, hey, I want to be a pilot. It's like now they have that way to do it. They have a pathway to go for it. So I think that's really cool. And especially for college kids that kind of see major airline as so far away. And now they have that 42 months, they can hold on to 42 months as tight as they can, and hope that comes really, really fast. So I think Propel is doing a lot of big things. And like you said, it's kind of started all the airlines starting their own pathway program. So it's going to be really cool to see where this goes and how this plays a part in the pilot shortage and how it can help. So I'm really excited to talk with you, and I'm thankful for you coming on and spending some time with me today.
All right. It was my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. AV Nation, that is a wrap of episode number 97 of the Pilot podcast. I hope you learned a lot about Delta's Propel program, and if you have the ability to apply for it, stop whatever you're doing right now, turn off the podcast, go apply for it, go join up and try to join Delta's Propel program so you can be a Delta. And if you're like me and you missed that boat, well, I guess you can just sit back and be sad that you're not a Delta right now. But Aviation, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was a lot of fun talking with Kelvin. Hopefully we can have him on in the future and talk a little more about how the program's developing in the future and if it's actually reaching all the goals that they said they wanted to reach. Aviation, leave a review, close to 500, giving out a t-shirt. Like I said earlier, shop pilotthepilot.com. I don't want to keep you any longer. Have a great day. As always, happy flying.